The following is brought to you in part by a grant from the Foundation for White Well-Being.
Look into this dark, unforgiving glass eye, the mesh of the microphone. Tell it your deepest thoughts, hopes, fears, and desires. We will take these emotions, turn them, and feed them back to you, for we have goals that your feelings will assist. This is how we rule. From the shadows, playing your emotions like puppet strings, we lead you to destinations that we have prepared, and you willingly oblige, thinking these decisions to be your own. When you do as we wish, we reward you, and when you go against us, we punish you. In a million subtle ways, we influence your supposedly free choice. By this method, we rule over a population convinced that they are the masters of their own destiny. Welcome to the Empire of Lies.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back to the Empire of Lies. Good evening. I'm Yiz, and this is Chris here.
Hello.
And we have prepared for you something a little different tonight. We're going to be talking about competing primary ideologies and factions of some of the ruling oligarchs. And before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that we would greatly appreciate you sharing some of your hard-earned dollars with us. So during the course of the stream, if you would like to financially support the work that we do, I split all of the proceeds from this stream series 50-50 with my man Chris here. And if you would like, I would prefer that you use Entropy, which, speaking of, I need to refresh that. I forgot that it died earlier. So I'll get Entropy up and running right now while we speak. During the course of the stream, I will have open Cash App as well as PayPal. And if you are a monthly subscriber over on Subscribestar, which I would deeply appreciate, you can send in tips over there. And of course, I will split those tips with Chris as well that come in for the stream. Excuse me. And I am greenlit for hyper chats on Odyssey as well as rants on Rumble. So there are many ways that you can financially support. Even $1 or $2, if you can throw it our way, it really does help because it makes us feel like what we do matters and is worth our professional time. And of course, I almost want to put quotation marks on professional, but I have been doing this for about 7 years now. So I guess if you can possibly be doing this professionally, I guess I've learned how to do it. So,
not YouTube though, because YouTube hates us for reasons completely unknown, obviously.
Oy vey. All right. So, before we get started here, I just want to remind you guys, we will not be pausing during the stream to read paid chats or interact with chat. These are tidy, prepared presentations that we like to keep to under an hour, and we will be getting to all of your questions, comments, and paid chats at the end of the stream. So I'll put up the banner reminder towards the end to let you guys know that we're near the end, and we'll address what you guys have to say at the end. So before we get started, I have a little preface prepared for tonight. Tonight, we are using the current hullabaloo in the media circus as a launch point to talk about a major difference between the anti-white oligarchical factions which shape the body politic of our countries, specifically the Anglosphere. But also, you could make similar parallels to Europe, especially the EU. No doubt in the last few weeks, you've all heard the dissident talking heads discussing Macron's choice for snap elections in France, the rise of the so-called far-right parties in Germany and other EU countries, the Zero Seats campaign and Nigel Farage in the UK, and of course the Biden-Trump debate, followed by the media and the Democrats both, all seemingly discovering in unison that Joe Biden is unfit for office. Imagine my shock. You know the circus. But what do you know of the circus? But what do you know of those who put on the circus, and why? Tonight, our presentation is about understanding the major factions of influence who determine which candidates are allowed onto ballots, the direction political parties are allowed to take, and the moral order that is enforced on us in our countries. So that is my preface for this. Chris, do you have anything you'd like to say or share before you get into it?
Yes, so my presentation tonight will be mainly contrasting the Fabianite faction in the UK with the Blairite or globalist faction that is currently struggling for the soul of the Labour Party. From the ground, from the view of the simple pleb, it's quite easy to think of these forces as monolithic, but there are actually key differences that, although they tend to team up in order to silence their enemies, for example, when it comes to parties like Reform or the right wing, however it's defined, when it comes down to the actual wielding of power, their goals and methods can be quite different, and I am going to elucidate on this somewhat. Let's in Smolin, shall we, Iz?
In Smolin!
Of course.
Here we go.
Fabian window, the famous Fabian window, remold it nearer to the heart's desire. This is the planet Earth on an anvil being heated up and then hammered into the desire of the Fabians, which is basically communists. The globalists do not really have a similar image. I don't know, maybe that image that was going around 4chan where they're all like, the SDG wheel, they're all putting their hands on the globe or something like that.
The globalists make me think of something even more primal than that, going all the way back to the 80s, of all the rich guys in Congress laughing and saying, we told them the wealth would trickle down.
Right. And of course, the other faction, the Tony Blair Institute, working with political leaders to drive change. What kind of change? Good change, bad change? Don't worry about it. Change. So let's go back to the Fabian window. The recent election in the UK has exposed a very interesting cleavage among the UK elite, and I would like to use it as an illustration of what can happen when elite groups have conflict with each other. Those of us on the lower levels of society, cast out from political decision-making because of holding the wrong views, often think of the elite as a cohesive whole. But this is not true. Not only can elite groups have different goals, sometimes they will go to war over competing visions. This war may be political, it may be economic, or it may devolve into military conflict. However, these kinds of conflicts are usually between elites that are quite far apart in ideological outlook. I mean, the military ones, or so it would seem. As Academic Agent would put it, power cannot abide a rival castle. The UK now has a new Labour government, and what is about to transpire is a war between the Fabian Society, represented by Starmer, who was on the executive committee, and the people around him, versus the Tony Blair Institute, which represents the neoconservative globalist project in the way that many understand it, in bodies such as the WEF, stakeholder capitalism, etc., etc. Indeed, this kind of conflict is more akin to court intrigue in the old school sense, a concept that seems to have disappeared in the popular mind and been branded a conspiracy theory. The idea that powerful groups jockey for power within monarchies and governments used to be a well-accepted and studied fact, with many great plays and novels written about the intrigues of the king or his advisors. Often in these stories, the greatest threat came not from an external enemy, but from an inner one, a rival power bloc jockeying for advantage and control over the governmental system of a country. And I would like to add, it's quite interesting that although in the popular mind and in popular media, it is generally considered a conspiracy theory to believe that one's own government acts this way. When it comes to foreign governments, Russia in particular, or Iran, it is basically accepted that there is such a thing as intrigue, backstabbing, assassinations. It is merely our own government, of course, in which such things would be regarded as conspiracy. In retrospect, the Conservative Party was a total joke. Not only because their solution to everything was to move further to the left to become more gay and more diverse, but because they could not interface properly with the levers of power and they were unwilling or unable to reconfigure those levers so that they could be properly used. In other words, they lacked both will and function. These fundamental lacks, in my opinion, stemmed from both a lack of vision as to what they were actually conserving, a common problem with many so-called conservative parties, as well as the unspoken cordon sanitaire, where anyone holding certain views, no matter how useful or intelligent they are, were automatically excluded from governance. Indeed, this resulted in a situation where they could try any policy except something that might work, since it was supported by people who were beyond the pale, such as reform. Immigration is an excellent example of this. Any policy could be tried, except anything that would actually fix the problem. That is assuming, of course, that the people in power actually wanted the problem fixed, which is not entirely sure. Many of the people in government have bought the idea that mass immigration brings economic growth and that there is no functional way to train more people in their own societies. The cancelling of teachers and students is an important component of this effect, since practically everyone in government and in policy has gone to university. By having one's name blackened, it can be assured that you will never hold any kind of office under the Conservative Party. Normally, this kind of gatekeeping can be good. You do not want someone turning up at a hustings gently suggesting that perhaps we should give the Holocaust another go. But if this cordon widens too much to encompass relatively milder and reasonable views, such as, quote, mass immigration is out of control and we must take serious measures to counteract it, or the white English as an ethnic group have the right to not become second-class citizens in their own countries under laws that penalize any organization for their collective self-interest, then things get much murkier. In other words, the Conservatives deliberately kept out intellectual and policy ideas that could have helped them to retain power because of political correctness. Labour is in a similar position, although they are much less harsh on people in university unless they advocate for Palestine. Being a communist is perfectly acceptable, however, or at least it won't get you cancelled. Speaking of Labour, in the last few days, the Dark Lord Tony Blair has emerged from the shadows in a triumphant blaze of glory to bestow his advice on the new Prime Minister, launching his 2024 Future of Britain conference immediately after the election. However, the Fabians and the Globalists, represented by Blair, have very different goals, and I think it is important to dissect some of these, since there is also a tendency from the ground to believe that the elites want the same things or have the same vision for how to get to the better society they are always banging on about.
I'd like to pause you here.
Sure.
I would like to let everyone know that we covered early on in Empire of Lies the Fabian Society. So if you would like some extra homework, I'm going to go grab that stream for you guys now and pop it in the chat, because Chris did an excellent presentation on just exactly what the Fabians are up to and what they want in a deep dive. And I am going to share that right now. It's called The Bloodless Revolution, the Fabian Gambit. And I am grabbing that link right now to share in the chat. And as you guys know, I really do like everyone to learn from these stream series that we do. So I would very much encourage you all to go check this out. This is our Fabian video from early this year or late last year. I think it was in maybe February of this year. But I'm going to pop that in the chat right now. So go ahead and open that up. All of you who are listening live, and if you're listening on replay, check out that older stream if you haven't heard it, or go over and revisit it. It's pretty good. Back to you, Chris.
So, as you can see from this triumphant tweet from the Fabian Society, 141 Fabians were elected in the UK. From every corner of the country, brilliant Fabians will be shaping the future of the left in Parliament. We can't wait to work with you all. To all Fabians who stood yesterday, whether elected or not, you are the backbone of our movement. Your commitment to our shared values makes us stronger. So, what do the Fabians want? Well, the Fabians want a more progressive society, defined very much in the neo-communist sense. So not just taxing the rich, but economic equality and also racial equality and, quote, social justice, that phrase that has bedeviled the world since its invention and led to the deaths of millions. The key aspects of making a government more progressive from a Fabian perspective include policies to reduce economic inequality, such as progressive taxation, increased public spending on social services, and regulation of industries to ensure fair wages and labor conditions, that is, price setting, which is always the road to poverty. Social welfare, expanding the welfare state to provide better healthcare, education, housing, and social security, particularly the disadvantaged and vulnerable. And again, this sounds very good on paper, but in practice, the welfare state under such a model has really no limits. The more rights you can dream up for someone, the more welfare you can justify spending. You must get this from the tax base at some point, usually by taxing the rich or printing money, and the entire society begins to stagnate and eventually collapse.
Can I say something on point number 2 here?
Sure.
One of the things I like to remind people about when it comes to welfare and social services, it's not that I view everything governmental as some kind of evil or wrong. I'm not saying that wanting there to be some kind of safety net or some kind of shared social framework through which people know that they're not just going to be left out in the cold when things go wrong, that comes from a good place. That comes from a noble place. But when you look at how bureaucracies of the last 100 years have used these systems, it creates an incentivization for the laziest, the weakest, the worst, the stupidest, and the least competent of your populace to breed and to live and to be healthy, while the onus of the people who are naturally productive, smart, competent, and driven gets heavier and heavier and heavier as they are squeezed to the limit for these systems. So even if your country has good intentions and all of the best wishes in the world, when these things get implemented, bloated bureaucracy and those really evil people that love to subvert anything good going on quickly turn these systems into this ever-crushing onus that that squeezes the lifeblood out of the productive, good-natured people in your culture to incentivize the dregs and the negative element of your people to make them swell to untenable numbers. That's why these things inherently fail and don't work out, even if people have good intentions. Not just under communism, but under any system where this grows and swells to become a problem.
Well, also because the avowed purpose of the Fabian Society is the introduction of socialism. That is
Yeah.
their stated endpoint. The only difference between the Fabians and the communists is that the Fabians believe in incremental steps towards socialism. And if you are observant on the traits of socialism, you will find all of them replicated here. So, number 3, labor rights. Strengthening workers' rights, including promoting fair labor practices, supporting trade unions, and ensuring safe working conditions. Again, this sounds lovely, but in practice, what this basically means is more power to the labor unions that then tend to run roughshod, especially in result to excessive money printing by a socialist government. The labor unions have to keep striking in order to keep wages up, to keep up with inflation, and the entire thing becomes a vicious circle. 4, public ownership. Advocating for public or cooperative ownership of essential services and industries to prevent exploitation and ensure that the benefits of economic activity are broadly shared. Again, this sounds great, but it's all in the application. It's one thing to nationalize the train service, but if you start nationalizing the banks or nationalizing, the TV or nationalizing, like, you can go too far with this, is what I'm saying. 5, environmental sustainability. Promoting
There's that word again. We've heard that a lot the last few years, haven't we?
Yes, promoting policies that address climate change and environmental degradation, emphasizing sustainable development and green technologies. I think this is a recent addition. I don't believe this was part of the original Fabian platform. And democratic governance, enhancing democratic institutions and processes to ensure greater public participation, accountability, and transparency in government decision making. Again, this sounds great, but what it tends to mean is that under socialism, you move from a constitutional monarchy, for example, more towards direct democracy. This is something I think that we are about to see more of in the UK. There are rumors that the Labour Party want to very significantly change the way that Parliament and the House of Lords runs.
Same way in the United States too. You've got the more radical element of the, let's just call them, let's call them the Fabian element of the Democrats. They always talk about, loading the court of the Supreme Court. They want to get rid of the, they want to move towards real democracy instead of the separations that we have, like the checks and balances system. They don't like the way that the Senate works, etc. So you see a lot of the same stuff being talked about here too in America.
Yes, and to be fair, everybody talks about democracy when they are on the losing side. So, for example, recently in the UK, Reform got quite a large chunk of the vote and got very few seats. And they're like, we got so many votes. That's not how the system works. I'm sorry, I'm not saying it is necessarily fair, but that is not how the system works. The UK does not operate on a system where you count the entire number of votes as a mass and then assign MPs on that basis. What happens is that you elect MPs in a certain local area. Right, so let's contrast this with the values of the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. Oh my God, that name, it makes me cringe. Change, right? Global change. We're not going to change. We're going to change the world. Now you can see how conceptually the Tony Blair Institute, the Globalists, and the Fabians you would think have quite a lot of crossover, right? They both want to change the world. But what the Tony Blair Institute wants is quite different to what the Fabians want. So the Tony Blair Institute wants technological innovation and digital government. So that's harnessing technology to improve public services, foster economic growth, and digital transformation of government services to make them more accessible and user-friendly. So I hope you are all keen on digital government because it is coming. Economic growth and productivity, promoting policies that stimulate economic growth and create high-quality jobs, investment in infrastructure that should be foreign investment, research, and development. Now, this is a big difference between the Fabians and the Blairite globalists. The Fabians believe simply in taxing the hell out of the rich and giving all the money to the poor. The Blairites believe in attracting foreign investment and trying to expand the economy, grow the pie, as someone like Reagan would have said, or a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah.
This is, sort of like why the left of the Labour Party.
That's the core element of trickle down I referenced earlier.
Yes. This is why the left of the Labour Party think that the Blairites are fascists.
Yeah.
3, education and skills. Reforming the education system to better prepare individuals for the demands of a modern economy. Again, expecting people to work. Probably not really the sort of Fabian core. Health and social care. They want to innovate in healthcare. So they want to basically make things more efficient, whereas the Fabian sort of way would be to just give more money. Climate change and sustainable development. Of course, you can't have a platform these days without it. Address climate change, reduce carbon emissions, and promote sustainable practices. And of course, supporting the transition to a green economy through investment in renewable energy and sustainable technologies. And might I note that the big question left hanging in the air about all of this green stuff is not only whether they will give it up in order to have the next war, which does look like it is coming. You cannot do net zero and have a war at the same time. War is a highly energy intensive process. But the other big question is, who will be the first person to say that nuclear power is green? Because nuclear power is actually extremely green compared to the amount of mining that you have to do for the lithium, for batteries and solar panels. Nuclear power is in fact very green, but there has been
despite how media and cartoons and comic books and straight up lies in the media have painted it, there is actually very manageable and a very small amount of waste generated from nuclear power compared to the output that you get.
Yes, but the idea so far from the globalists generally has been the idea that the first world must undergo degrowth, which means that their GDP per capita must come down to roughly that of Jamaica. And thus, all of the countries in the world will have a similar amount of GDP. And the best way to do this is to throttle energy usage, which is why we are seeing in Germany, Australia, the UK, Canada, all of these moves away from cheap and abundant sources of power. But as I was saying, you cannot run a war under these conditions. So it's going to be interesting to see how this evolves. Global leadership and international cooperation, positioning the UK as a leader in addressing global challenges, including international development, security, and trade. Now, I suspect that the Fabians, or definitely the lefty Labour types, would think that this statement is a bit racist. I mean, who are the English to take a lead in anything? Surely they should all be sitting at the back of the bus like Rosa Parks and bowing their heads penitentially and thinking about all the bad stuff that they did rather than attempting to lead anything. And promoting multilateralism and cooperation to tackle issues such as climate change, pandemics, and geopolitical instability. This is why organizations such as the World Economic Forum and the UN are so loved by the globalists, because they are global. And of course, last, inclusive growth and social justice. Now, you notice that social justice is the last on this list, whereas I believe the Fabians would have bumped this up quite a bit. Ensuring that economic growth benefits all segments of society, reducing inequality, and promoting social mobility. Now, this is a very different interpretation of the idea of social justice from the communists. The idea that you would reduce inequality through economic development is absolutely haram to the communists. The way the communists imagine reducing inequality is by simply taking stuff from the rich and just giving it to the poor.
Yeah.
Advocating for policies that protect and empower disadvantaged groups, ensuring equal opportunities for all. Again, much of this is economic. So
one of the things that I noticed that's a big difference is if you words like neocon or Bush's New World Order, things like that, the military industrial complex of Israel and the United States, they tend to lean more this way because they want the global market. They want to incentivize international trade, big money, big investment, new businesses, forever growth. Like Alex said in the chat, our Lord and Savior, the GDP, died for our sins. Like, that's this team. This team wants globalism through that. So if you want to use a more modern term for this group, you could call them the technocracy, I guess. They want digital ID. They want everything to be fast and easy digitization for quick trade, quick goods moving, all that stuff. And they believe their goals of social justice, fairness, having better equality will come about through these new technocratic market forces, as opposed to the Fabians, which have a more sort of pie in the sky, feudal communism, wish upon a star goals that are far less realistic and more emotional and religiously driven.
Yes, exactly. And the Blairites are not going to be on board with degrowth, at least not in any extreme sense. Whereas I suspect the Fabians most definitely would. Now, an interesting way to contrast this is from the Fabian Society about the social determinants of ill health. Now, the Fabians would look at health, and remember that health can be defined as something that can also be used for tyrannical ends. You can essentially use health as an excuse to pass many laws that control human behavior. And this is one of the problems with having a publicly funded health service the way that the UK does, because sooner or later you can make the argument that, oh, well, you shouldn't smoke because other people have to pay for it. Now, obviously, the retort to this should be, but I pay for it, right? What do I pay my taxes for? To the NHS. But it's now, of course, been normalized, and so a new tax comes along. So the Fabians say that the social and economic determinants of health are irrefutable, and the way that they would deal with that is redistribution, regulation, and state spending. Whereas the Blairites would say, well, what we need is more modern medical technology, better drugs, more efficient health service,
Digital health passes, so
digital health passes,
so your
yes.
PHI, your personal health information, travels with you on your whatever you have at the time, whether it's the chip in your brain, if we get to that point, or your smartphone. That would be their solution as opposed to this.
Yes. And of course, the Fabians are moving to the idea that environmental factors such as climate change, social factors such as relationship and stress affect individuals and alter their chances of illness and recovery. And of course, this is going to be slanted towards certain groups over others. As I was saying, the Fabians would say that the way to fix this is to tax the rich, then marshal the forces of governments to give handouts to those who are more socially likely to be in ill health, while banning all vices or at least taxing them into oblivion. The Tony Blair approach would be to solve the problems of poor health outcomes by expanding the economy, arguing that it is a rising tide that lifts all boats, and that the way out of poverty which causes such poor health is not handouts but better jobs and a more stable economy. The Tony Blair Institute equally has never advocated for bans on alcohol or tobacco, unlike the Fabians, who have been talking about using taxation and restrictions short of outright bans to improve outcomes in, quote, marginalized communities. The Fabians, of course, are also very keen on price controls and economic intervention. It always seems to come back to price controls. And just again to address, the Fabians are very keen on the idea of the social determinants of health, which essentially means that you have to alter society to make people more healthy, not grow society. Now, when it comes to central banking, it is important to note that neither the Fabians or the Blairites are against central banking per se. However, there is a fundamental difference. While the Blairites believe that central banking should be, quote, independent and respond to the market, which in practice means the oligarchy and that the central banks have undue influence over the government, the Fabians believe that the government should take complete control of central banking and use direct government money printing to reduce inequalities, fight financial crises, and eliminate poverty, which is absolutely not going to work. Whether this means specifically that the government should not let the central bank create money and then loan it to the government is unclear. Keynesianism, the idea of running the government off printed money in order to create things such as full employment, is now fully established as the dominant economic paradigm, with the argument simply being about how the fruits of the magical money tree should be distributed. It is highly likely there will be another global economic crash in the next few years. We are overdue for one. And when Labour bails out the banks again, it is going to play very badly with some members of the public. And I would like to note that the original argument for central banking was that it would promote economic stability, when in truth, it has done the total opposite. Before central banking, it was not uncommon for countries to go for 50 or 100 years without an economic crisis, usually precipitated by war, while now they happen every 10 to 20 years like clockwork. The Fabians, of course, are big fans of the welfare state. They regard the creation of the welfare state and the NHS as one of the greatest achievements of incremental socialism ever, and wish to see it expanded until the government provides welfare, education, and healthcare for all of its citizens. Of course, the number of rights and needs that should be provided by the state are always expanding, and the question of where all the money comes from is inevitably answered by taxing the rich, without any realization that due to the highly mobile nature of international capital, that raising taxes too high simply promotes capital flight as the rich move to other countries. The Blairites do understand this dynamic, meaning that they believe the best way to increase tax revenue is to promote foreign investment by lowering taxes and regulations to make for a competitive business environment and harmonizing investment with international with international organizations to make it easier for money to flow into the country. And of course, the big question underlying all of these economic models is immigration. From the Fabian end, it is impossible to offer a massive welfare state and at the same time let anyone who wants to come into your country claim these benefits. However, since the Fabians are motivated by socialist principles of fairness and justice, many of them do not think it moral to not let everyone who wants to come into the country to come. And again, this is from the Fabian Society. And, they're basically, attempts to turn these people away, by which they mean refugees, quote unquote, mean literally turning our back on refugees. This is morally inexcusable and the furthest thing from fair play. The Fabian strategy when it comes to immigration is to create safe, legal routes for claiming asylum that would make the English Channel crossings unnecessary. What's going to happen when these people's asylum applications are refused and they try and cross the channel anyway? Don't worry, we won't refuse any of the asylum applications at all. And once one asylum seeker is here, they can bring their family over as well. The Fabians want to clearly signpost routes for asylum seekers at all air, ferry, and international rail terminals to make it easier for them to come. Ban any vetting of asylum applications overseas.
My hatred for these people is beyond words.
Oh yeah, it's allow asylum seekers to look for work in 6 months if no decision has been reached. They should be able to work in any job and should no longer be confined to the shortage occupation list. I mean, it's crazy. Like they are just all about it. The Blairites, on the other hand, while supporting immigration generally, are much more concerned about too much immigration having bad social effects, something that Blair himself has recently addressed. Although, as usual, Blair's solution is digital ID. And to be fair, Blair has also noted that immigration is causing a shift of the political center towards the right. And this is not something that the Blairites or the globalists generally want, because the right promotes nationalism, and nationalism, by definition, goes against the globalist project.
Yeah.
On balance, if given a Hobson's choice between the two, I would certainly go with the Blairites when it comes to economics. Yeah. Although we may wind up living in a globalist dystopia, at least there will be food. And that is yeah. I mean, that is very important, right? Like, whereas the Fabians, the way they are going, their plans would completely destroy. We wouldn't even get a sort of semi-cool cyberpunk utopia. It would just be all...
You mean dystopia?
Yeah, dystopia. Yeah. So it would just instead just be, infinity migrants and everyone eating out of garbage bins. It's truly a harrowing thought. It is also important to note the Tony Blair Institute's backing for the Ukrainian digital government's platform, DIA, which the Ukrainian government has completely transitioned to following the outbreak of war. This platform allows citizens to interact with all government departments via their smartphone and maintains a centralized government document depository for proving your identity. The DIA platform also allows the government to communicate with the people via live streams, issue money and benefits, and allows Ukrainians to report their neighbors for Russian collusion. Yes, that is a real thing. It is clear from the perspective of the Tony Blair Institute that Ukraine is a testbed for, quote, digital governance, and that this will be rolled out in the UK and probably many other countries as well. Although it will not be sold as digital ID, it is in effect the same thing. meaning that you will need biometric authentication to access any government service and to do many other things such as rent a car, open a bank account, etc. The Tony Blair Institute has been backing this idea by claiming that 40% of public services jobs could be improved by AI and save them 20% of their time. And what is the source for this claim? Well, they plugged a bunch of data into ChatGPT, and that's what ChatGPT told them. So, I mean, AI investigated itself and found that it did nothing wrong. And AI has said that AI is most definitely going to be a great force for the future, and nothing bad will ever go wrong. And I would just like to
Hello,
mention,
I am government man, come from government to tell you government done nothing wrong.
yes, yes, literally. It's totally crazy. They're very, very much into this idea of digital governance. In fact, everything I could find on DIA, the Ukrainian app, was literally from the Tony Blair Institute. And I would like to point out that in countries such as India, where this has been done, the Indians have a system called Aadhaar that was hacked, and about a billion records, 100 million records, some incredible number of records were hacked out of the system. Now, these were people's real details and possibly biometric details as well. It's not something that can be changed. It's not like you can just, change your Gmail address or change your password. If this kind of database gets hacked and leaked, all of your data is out there permanently. And this brings in another very, very interesting concept under digital governance, which is that anyone who has the ability to create false identities in the digital government register, whether they be people from the intelligence services or people from the criminal underground, will have a tremendous advantage over any normal law-abiding citizen. As horrible as digital governance sounds, I would not actually have as much of a problem with it if it were not for the UK's horrible record on censorship and the jailing of regime opponents.
Yeah.
Something which the UK tries to pretend does not happen. Or if it does happen, that the people so affected deserved it for being racists or something.
Or something.
If the UK had a strong constitution and the laws clearly stated that the government could not use this technology to target people based upon political or speech affiliations, I would feel a lot better about it. Not to say that it wouldn't happen, but at least if the government could be sued afterwards, that would make me feel a little bit better. But we don't, and so it's not going to work that way.
Yeah.
In conclusion, there is really nothing the average person can do to influence the titanic battle about to take place in UK politics and economics in the fight for the soul of Labour, which will be ruling the UK for at least the next 5 years. But I hope that I have helped you to understand some of the subtle differences between the different strains of the left and bring a bit more nuance into a movement that many on the ground simply see as one overwhelming blob. Personally, I think the globalists are going to win this one. Not only do they have overwhelming lobbying and economic power, the might of business is on their side. Also, if there is one thing you can say about the Dark Lord Tony Blair, it is that he almost always gets his way. Right. Thank you very much.
Indeed, he does. Let's go to Embiggen View.
Okay.
There we go. I like that presentation. Very often in our circles and in any dissident podcast space, you hear people refer to whether it's anti-white oligarchs or the globalists or the regime. Too many people give credence to the real rulers all being in lockstep or all being the same religion or saying they're all Jews or something like that. But that's just not the case. There are multiple families, religions, facets of the people who actually rule us, and they don't all have the same goals or even the same methods that they think are the right path to go on. And in that vein is sort of how I wanted to present my part of the presentation tonight. And I wanted to give you something a little white pilling, and as well as talk about a major facet of why the Go Free method is something I talk about a lot. So here we go. Why does understanding the differences among oligarchs matter? Why do you need to know about it? Those of us old enough to remember G.I. Joe remember the slogan, knowing is half the battle. And perhaps even more of our viewers will know the wisdom from the Bible, know thine enemy. Chris and I want you to understand the world we live in. Since the institutions we once relied on teach us these things have all become subverted and corrupt, a concerned person must go to greater lengths to discover what is actually going on. Understanding that the major factions or ideological camps which drive economics, politics, and international relations don't all walk in lockstep, nor do they even have the same goals in mind, can help you with the most important thing you can have as a regular person, as a citizen in this evil empire. And that is the will to outshine the darkness and the will to survive this long, hard winter about to fall upon us. Regardless of which camp of thought the anti-white oligarchs happen to fall into, they all want us to be demoralized and succumb to apathy. For in apathy, they reign supreme. Let me remind you all of an old adage. All it takes for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing. That is precisely what the oppressive anti-whiteism is for, to demoralize us, make our people atomized, scared, paralyzed, incapable of posing any threat to their agenda. I often bring up the Go Free method, and tonight I wish to impart the primary reason for this as it ties directly into this presentation about being positive and refusing to give in to demoralization. The Go Free method's primary goal is to bring a vitalization to Western people, which we currently lack, though it does seem to be growing, perhaps in no small part due to the thankless and tireless work of the white well-being team. This is why I preach about not playing the villain of the anti-white narrative, meaning avoiding taking on labels like fascist, neo-Confederate, Nazi, racist, etc. It's also why I preach that you shouldn't make your primary speaking points about pointing out the evils of certain religious factions that we can't name, certain silly small hat wearers, the crimes of certain non-white demographics, or the disasters of mass migration. These particulars, while not villainous themselves to discuss, or even wrong, are not what the focus for Westerners, white people, need most, which is a focus on ourselves, on our well-being, and on our unity. I want everyone listening to this, whether live or on replay later, to understand the why here. The focus of our education, our propaganda, our entertainment media, and our artwork should be entirely on the love and celebration of our own people, stopping the harm being done to us, and celebrating our culture as well as our people's myriad achievements. This is what we lack, and this is why we fail. I am once again reminded of a question the infamous George Lincoln Rockwell asked a group of concerned Southern white folks, which was, why do we always lose? I now know why. We lost because we foolishly believed that fact triumphed over feelings, and that factoids somehow were truer and more powerful than myth or ideologically driven belief. We must make our people believe again, believe in us. We must engender ethnic, cultural unity to survive this plague of anti-whiteism ravaging our countries and poisoning our race's posterity. I want you to understand that these factions of anti-white demons are not gods. They are not hyper-intelligent. They're not sublimely organized. They do not wield ineffable ultimate power. They're just people. They are powerful and evil. And people do not have infinite patience, infinite resources, or infinite attention. These awful people have to eat and sleep. They have many enemies among their own ranks that they have to worry about. They have an ever-worsening bloated bureaucracy to manage. They are fallible, and they are making mistakes. We must keep pushing, and we must persevere. We must outlast them to have a future worth living. And understanding that they aren't gods and that they are fallible will help lead you to a more positive, confident self, and hopefully leading you to have personal success in building the best you, the best family, and the best community you can to weather this storm. That's what I've got to say on that.
Very nice. Right. Do we go to super chats?
Yes, we have several. Let's see what we have here. Let me check the YouTube chat. Let's see. Okay, nothing strange going on. It seems like people liked our presentation tonight. That's good. I'm glad that it landed well. Thank you, Simon. Good to see you here. All right. Okay, let me go ahead and take that down and we will get to the chats. Let's start with our friend and financial supporter over on Subscribestar, June. Good to see you again, June M. June M, back with $5 again this week. She says, thank you, Yiz and Chris, for this great discussion each week. It is so valuable for survival in this anti-white world. Well, you're welcome, sister. That's why we do what we do.
Thanks, June.
Thank you very much. Over on Entropy, we got Alex. Alex, good to see you, brother. Alex for $5. Thank you so much. He says, surf the Kali Yuga because it's white boy summer. Woohoo! Love you guys. Keep fighting the Jays. Well, thank you, sir. I'm fighting all the anti-whites, not just the anti-white Jays, but thank you.
In London, it's basically white boy autumn, but you know, I mean, inshallah.
inshallah. But what struggle? All right. Last but not least, we have for $3. Oh, wait, no, I forgot. We have a Cash App as well. We'll do the Cash App first because it's Jason again. Jason Kuna, and for $6 like usual, he says, enjoying the educational aspect, folk tithe and kip. Well, thank you, Jason. I appreciate that.
Jason. Appreciate
it.
And
I do appreciate your Go Free method. It has definitely helped me a lot. Thank you very much. Let me make sure there's nothing else popping over here on Cash App. If it will, that's not refreshing. I guess the app is locked, whatever. Let's go to PayPal now and make sure I'm not missing anybody over there. And then we'll get to Ara King Green Moon over on Entropy. Okay. Cash App, are you going to refresh or are you just going to stay locked? I don't know what happened to you. Why are you being silly? I'm just going to kill the app and start over. That might be faster. All right. We'll let Cash App refresh there. Okay. Nothing new on PayPal. So that leaves Ara King Green Moon for $3 over on Entropy. He says, so they want to use AI with government. That is going to backfire. A bunny VTuber, whatever the hell that is, has repeatedly talked these AIs around. She is an entertainer, not a techno bro or a tech bro or a hacker. I predict all kinds of issues.
Yes.
I don't know what a bunny VTuber is.
I do.
Okay.
Because I watch Twitch sometimes. So
my condolences.
Yeah, it's all right. So look, Arakin, that is in fact a very, very interesting point. There are in fact ways of poisoning AI models. I think ultimately, along with the sort of technocratic urge for the complete eye of Sauron on society, is the urge to use AI to combat the problems of too much data. Over the last few decades, the amount of data gathering by governments and large corporations has increased exponentially.
Yeah.
However, the means to sort and understand this data has not. And I think that this is a very, very big, in fact, I know this is a very, very big part of the TBI's push for AI. So, for example, one of the things that the Tony Blair Institute wants to do is to open up everyone in the UK, their NHS records, to AI scraping, so that basically pharma companies can use that data for trials. Now, this could be used in almost as many ways as you can count. The most concerning, of course, being the sort of Minority Report idea, where you just let an AI loose on, the personal data of millions of citizens and get it to throw some likely matches, which are then basically hassled by Prevent or put under surveillance or something like this. The problem, of course, is that the AI is not likely to understand the human element of this. For example, when it comes to things like Prevent, it stands to reason that many of the people that are being unjustly hassled by forces like Prevent, you're just going to radicalize them further. The idea of Prevent to de-radicalize people is completely failing. The people who are already radicalized, like, the extremist Muslims, they don't care. They just lie. And the people who are genuinely just, innocent are going to wind up being even more radicalized. Now, you could sort of say that, well, this is what the government wants, because without a supply of radicals to use that technology on, someone might say, well, do we even need it? But yeah, this is it's going to be very, very interesting. And as well, at least in countries like America, and I think here, although if the Blairites gain control, I think we are going to see a decline in diversity hires, simply because it doesn't make for good functioning businesses. But in countries like the US, it's interesting to note that as the power of these tools are going up, the intelligence of the people using them is going down, especially due to the sort of recent ideological purges that have taken place in, things like the civil service and the security services, where all of these sort of, it doesn't really matter whether you're an intelligent person. If you've got, the wrong political views, they just force you out. And thus they are sort of essentially excluding many, many capable people who would actually make that system run more effectively. So it's going to be interesting to see whether at a certain point they basically start rolling back on the political correctness, putting the work away, to coin the phrase, in order to basically achieve certain pragmatic objectives that just, can't be reached. The Blairites do strike me as much, much more pragmatic than the Fabians. So, if it's the Fabians, they're never going to sort of want to give it away. But the Blairites will be like, well, you can't run a country like this. So
yeah,
we shall see.
So I think that pragmatically, that's why they will eventually win and get in the driver's seat, because I think there are too many people that want this global technocratic money machine to keep rolling. They know that they can't let the Fabians and all this other stuff happen. I think that's why, again, I know that this will make certain people who listen to us very happy. That's why I don't think that the state of Israel is going to last much longer. And I don't think that the Talmudic Zionist angle in a lot of our governments is going to remain that type of stranglehold of power that it once was, is because it's just too destructive. It's too crazy. It's too insane to keep pushing. And I think that, despite that particular group's power, wealth, and connection to the war machine, I think too many people that have influence and control via soft power and finance are going to push back on that. And I don't think that we're going to see the Israeli United States war machine have the same sway this century that it did last century. I think that's going to wane specifically for these reasons.
Well, it's always easy to field stupid ideas when everything is going well. When the chips are down, and we were making this point about war earlier, but you could also make the same point about things like famine or economics. When the rubber really hits the road, people are going to have to choose between their comfy sort of virtue signaling or actually embracing the facts on the ground as they are. And again, the Blairites seem to be aware, or at least Tony Blair seems to be aware of the facts on the ground. Just the fact that he made the admission that the political center is moving to the right is distinctly anti-Fabian. The Fabians would essentially say, well, we don't care what the right thinks. They're all, they're all racist. They can all go die and jump off a cliff.
They're all deplorables. They don't get to.
They're all deplorable. Yes, exactly. They're all deplorable. We don't care what they think. Even, and of course, historically speaking, if you do this, then the number of people that you are excluding from society and also excluding from representation, might I add, begins to grow and grow and grow until it encompasses a very serious chunk of your society. And that may in fact tip over into civil war, which I am absolutely sure that the globalists do not want, because it would be a barrier to trade. So,
because remember, their god is GDP, and war is not good for that in some ways. And I think that they want the slow, controlled, forever growth. And war creates destabilization, just like all of this anti-white, crazy, insane, far-left stuff also is bad for that machine. So,
well,
anyway,
war over there is good for economics,
but not war where we are.
War here
right.
is bad because it's destabilizing. So if we can have a nice war over there, that's totally fine. But war over here, just I mean, they're not above saying that if we don't have the war over there, we're going to have a war over here. But in truth, they don't want, in my opinion, very serious disruption.
Well, that wraps up the stream for tonight. Thank you all for being here. Thank you very much to those of you who financially support the channel. Thank you so much. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Chris and I will be back Monday with the Habiting TV over on Chris's channel. And then later that evening, Discordant Dragons on my channel. So I hope to see you all there. And I hope you have a wonderful week. And please take the things you learn from this channel, make your life better, and do your best to build the unity, the racial, ethnic unity that we need, that has been stripped from us on purpose, because that is how regular people can fight against this evil. I love you guys, and I wish you all the best. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.